What's happening? It's Mel here. So what I want to talk about today is the idea of machines and creativity. So I was reading a book called The Master Algorithm. Just forget the author now. Um, but one of the things he said was that when you if you want machines to be creative, then what you get is machine learning. And I don't know, something about that kind of just brought it home, the idea that machines are now creative. It was something, like I'm 35, it was something that um, for most of my life that was not a statement you could make, and more the opposite was a statement that we made, that machines are creative, and that's what makes them machines. That's what makes us human. That's what separated us. And that limitation on machines, the lack of creativity, and something about that being dumb. No matter what they did, if they couldn't do that, then they just weren't that impressive. And I think unconsciously we knew what, some people would have been conscious of it, but I think unconsciously, even just a general person knew what creativity meant, and the lack of it put such a limitation on machines that they weren't something that was a threat, certainly, and they weren't something that was all that impressive to just the general population. But now things have changed, and this idea of machine learning, um, essentially a dumb machine learning to be smarter by itself, and the creativity inherent in that, the creativity inherent in just learning, um, it changes things completely. So I think the idea that we could argue against machines as creative has almost disappeared. Um, I don't know of anyone who is still saying that this is not creativity. This is just something less. Yeah, I don't even know what you'd call it. Kind of like connecting the dots and just kind of incremental um, deductive reasoning or something like that. Um, that argument doesn't exist anymore and doesn't hold water. Machines are creative, and that signifies something new. There's a dramatic shift, and what I think what we certainly get is an other, capital O, an other, um, in machines with this characteristic of creativity. Machines then become something something distinct. They're no longer um, they're no longer simply what we control. I think inherent in this idea of creativity is that machines are beginning to do things we don't understand. Um, and more they're beginning to do things we can't understand, and this is when things get bizarre and dangerous, and you get in the realms of science fiction. Um, it becomes existential in a sense, and it's something we haven't experienced as a species um, for a very long time. This idea of an other that is a threat, that is potentially an equal and a threat to us, and I think this is essentially why we've allowed it to happen and created it, and don't really see it as a problem. Certainly not collectively, but in many ways, even individuals that are involved in this just kind of take it for granted and keep pushing things forward, oblivious to the probable consequences. So the idea that machines will do things that we can't understand, that we're incapable of understanding, and the fact that this then it inevitably creates a threat, because if we can't understand it, if it's an unknown, then we cannot react to it intelligently. We cannot live with it, essentially. Yeah, it becomes just this impossibility, this problem that we can't surmount, and it becomes it's hard to understand, but it becomes something that we're unable to deal with effectively, intelligently, proactively, assertively. These things that we value so highly in our interactions with other humans, we will no longer be able to draw on these qualities, these skills, because we can't understand what we're dealing with. And I think with this, more and more machines will become unrecognizable, and their products, what they produce, will become unrecognizable. So you see it in this issue of social media today, where the machine learning, where it can learn about the preferences of a person and apply some kind of algorithm and manipulate behavior based on this extremely high level of understanding of what is going on inside a person's mind. It's on that kind of cusp of I just don't know what's going on. There is still that slight grasp of, okay, if you apply these parameters to a situation with enough information to fill that paradigm, to fill that hypothesis, then you'll be able to get some answers that you can act upon. So, for example, plug in all the choices that a person's made over a 5-year period, and you can guess with a high probability what that person will do next. That is still something we understand. When applied to very simple acts like voting or what product they will choose, it's when you get into finer and finer acts, more subtle, more nuanced, that things start to cross that line into a place where we're not really sure what's happening. So how do you know when a person is going to break up with their boyfriend or something like this? Something that seems so dictated by emotion and circumstance. Instead, it becomes something that is predictable, and this is something different. And I think more and more as machines get creative, then our world becomes more calculable, calculated, and maybe less creative. I'm not sure. That's just thinking out loud. But it's an interesting thing, and I think it signifies a dramatic shift. Certainly in my view of machines, I think collectively in our view of machines, it wasn't always this way. And this idea of machines as creative, as this author stated, I can't remember what his name was. The book was The Master Algorithm, and the idea of creativity, machine learning, machines as creative, is something very new, and potentially very destructive, certainly revolutionary. Yeah. All right, good talking to you. I'll see you next time.